Here we go. Hey, let's do it. Hey, giddy up on three. 1, 2, 3. Giddy up.
You can feel the buzz when you're around this city. People have fallen in love with the Birmingham Stallions. Here we go. We're getting a little juice going.
Birmingham is going to win the USFL championship.
Welcome back to State of the Stallions. Unfortunately, D couldn't hop on this week, but no worries because got a great guest here that is no stranger to the show. The one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, James Larsen. James, how you doing, sir?
Not bad, not bad. I'm glad backup O lineman James Larsen could join the show today.
That's kind of the theme right now. The Stallions lost two O linemen in the game last week. People had to kind of plug in, fill some holes, and you're doing your part too. So
Yeah, I'll be out there.
uh,
I'm on the depth chart, guys.
yeah, well, I think you could hold your own.
Oh yeah, I mean 5'4", 160. I mean,
You're stout. You're stout, no doubt.
Bring on Taco Charlton. I got this.
Yeah, yeah. He only's got about a foot on you, so it should be easy. James, we it's been a couple weeks since we talked, at least in this capacity, and there's been several games that have happened, including the Stallions' dramatic essentially last second win last week against the Renegades. Maybe you'd be curious to hear your kind of thoughts on the Stallions' performance thus far this season, and then maybe in particular, kind of your analysis of what was a not ideal, maybe we could say, performance, but yet still a win last Friday.
Yeah, it's kind of like a typical Birmingham Stallions type of win sometimes, where we've seen them plenty of times in games past where, they're ugly the first 2, 3 quarters and they just find a way to figure it out in the fourth. And that's kind of the Skip Holtz way. I felt like this week was a little bit less of them figuring it out in the fourth and more so they got a lucky break. And look, I mean, I don't think whether you're a fan of the team or not, you cannot argue that you guys did not catch a pretty big break there down the stretch. I mean, to have a false start on your own guy result in you having another set of downs in that scenario, you should have been punished and instead you got rewarded. So, but the offense has been pretty disappointing, and I think part of it is like you said, the offensive line has had some injuries. They've also had some turnover on the offensive line, some new faces there. Alex McGoo goes down week one. My main concern actually is more so looking at the backfield and just the lack of production from these running backs. Skip Holtz kind of made it clear. I talked to him before the season, was like, hey, what was kind of the mindset behind bringing back the same running backs and, you're not, you have the same running backs on the roster. You didn't bring in anybody new. And he was like, well, I've won with these guys before, so I'm just going to stick with them. And uh, I don't know. I feel like they really could have used, an extra boost or bringing in at least some new prospect that could provide them with a bit of a spark. Because so far, CJ Marable or Ricky Person, neither one of them has really done a whole lot. I mean, I don't know what your take is on that, Luke, but I just haven't seen it out of either one through 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, the numbers don't lie, the stats don't lie. The Stallions, I don't even know if they have a rusher on the team who's eclipsed 100 rushing yards on the season yet. I'm fairly certain they don't actually. And I don't know. I mean, I think to your point, I mean, yeah, I don't think it would have hurt maybe to bring somebody else in to add a little bit of competition, maybe like you said, potentially add a spark. And I think they actually did try to do that with Demetric Felton. I think he
Yeah.
would have been a guy who could have sort of done that, but good for him. Unfortunately for us, he got picked up by the Browns. I think the running backs we have are great. I think obviously I think when he's given the opportunity, Ricky Person Jr. has proven himself to be one of the best backs in this league. CJ Marable, he's
A-
never. Go ahead.
And I mean, it's not like Ricky's necessarily been performing terribly. It's just there's not been much because the problem is, look, I just pulled up the stats, so let's break it down. Ricky Person's the leading rusher. He's got 95 yards on the
Yeah.
season. He's averaging 3.4 yards a carry. So, Is it phenomenal? No, but like it's at least respectable, right? I feel like he's, made the most of some of his snaps out there. But the bigger problem is that you don't have CJ Marable or Larry Roundtree doing much at all. I know Marable missed week 2 for personal reasons, but he's only got 24 yards. He's averaging 1.6 yards a carry. Larry Roundtree, the game that he was active, he had 5 carries for 4 yards. He's averaging under 1 yard a carry. And again, this isn't exactly the running back's fault. I feel like the offensive line has not been phenomenal for them this year. Kind of as we've talked about, there's multiple facets to this, but that's a really concerning factor where you don't have Alex Magoo anymore, right? Who was the majority of the rushing success that you've seen so far this year. Outside of what he did in week 1, there's been next to none. So then you see Matt Corral, who's kind of got more weight on his shoulders, and he's going out there and he's making some poor decisions because he feels like he has to do too much. And that's why the Stallions offense has just been in a rut these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, um I think as much of the blame goes to the offensive line and Skip as it does the running backs themselves. I think obviously the running backs have not, for the most part, other than a couple exceptions with maybe Ricky, have not been able to um, sort of, create on their own. We're not seeing like a Saquon Barkley situation where it's like, what looks like it's going to be a 2 yard gain turns into a 50-yard gain because guy breaks 3 tackles and makes some ridiculous moves or something like that. So I think we could get more production from the running backs, but I think at the same time, number one, there's a lack of commitment to the run game. I mean, the Stallions threw the ball over 40 times last week, which, in an NFL or college game, that's a good amount. In a UFL game, that's a lot because the UFL with their running clock, there's less offensive plays that generally happen than in like an NFL or a college game. So to throw the ball over 40 times I mean, that's significant, I think, for a league like this. And, so Ricky and CJ, like on average, I think, they're getting like 4 or 5 carries a game or something like that. And I know that this is something that Skip's talked about in the past. He has a tendency, especially maybe in situations where the things aren't going according to plan, to kind of default to being a little pass happy and not being patient enough with the run and letting the run get established. And I think that that's been a challenge. I think also, the offensive line, obviously they struggled in week 1 in the pass game, but they didn't necessarily do much better in the run game either. Like you said, the only rush yards really we had was from Alex scrambling. And then in the next couple of weeks, they've really improved in the pass game. I mean, their pass blocking has been infinitely better than that first week, but their rush blocking hasn't necessarily really been any better. I mean, I don't feel like the running backs are getting huge holes and great opportunities to pick up yardage, and they're just not taking advantage of it. I mean, it's not really there. So I think it's a little bit of a combination of everything. I think it's the play calling, I think it's the blocking, and I think it's the running backs. And I don't know. I think the Stallions need to go into, in my opinion, I think the Stallions need to go in this week against Houston, who's not, at least thus far, has not proven to be one of the best teams in the league. And I think they really need to really commit to establishing the run. And even if that means, first, second down, you're only getting a couple of yards, like I think you just got to kind of keep banging the rock until, something breaks through. And I think that's going to help Matt Corral in the pass game. I mean, last week, there were so many sort of obvious passing situations or situations where we came out 5 wide, and it's just like, again, we're throwing the ball 40 times, over 40 times that game. The defense sort of knew what was coming, and the defensive line could kind of pin their ears back, try and get pressure, and then they were just dropping a lot of guys in coverage, and Corral couldn't get in any sort of rhythm. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's one of the obvious issues right now with the Stallions offense is the lack of run production. And I think they got to find a way to figure that out. And I think it's again, all 11 guys plus the coaching staff. But right now that is certainly one of the huge problems with the run game is outside of a couple runs that Ricky had in week 2. There really hasn't been anything. And Ricky's out this week with an injury. So like you said, the only guy who's averaging more than a yard per carry, it won't even be playing. So got to see if CJ can kind of get back into his groove and see if Roundtree can kind of do anything. I mean, he showed a couple of flashes last year, but
Against
um,
Houston, interestingly enough,
yeah,
if you look at some of the success that he had, it was that Week 5 game that I think CJ Marable missed, broke off a couple of big runs. So we'll see. It's like you said, the offensive line, the pass blocking, excuse me, the run blocking grades on PFF, they're the second worst in the league when it comes to run blocking. So there's plenty of room for improvement. I think they at least have one of the top coaching staffs in the league, so we know Birmingham will make adjustments and try to figure it out. I think Saturday night will be a really good telltale sign to figure out where they are. Like if they
Yeah.
come kind of out of the gate and kind of dominate the way they have against Houston in times past, then we can start thinking like, okay, Birmingham might actually be back on track. But if they're struggling against this Roughnecks team, like that will be a scary sign to see, where this team is actually at.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about this game this weekend. But before we do that, I want to circle back real quick just to gotta talk just briefly a little bit more about this kind of controversial late call in the Stallions game. And I think trying to be as objective as I can be about it. I mean, I think what I would say is the the call was the right call. Now, you don't necessarily have to like the call or think that that the rule like what I would say is you don't necessarily have to like the rules, and you can make a case that the rules should be changed, but what was carried out was the right call. Um you mentioned that like the Stallions got rewarded when they should have got punished. And the thing about it is, it's sort of just in some sense it's kind of just circumstantial because the Stallions did get punished. I mean, they got penalized and got a 5-yard false start. Now, it just happened that the refs didn't blow the play dead, and when it kind of played itself out, there was an interception. So the 5-yard punishment seems like a lot worse punishment than an interception. And so in that sense, it seems like a reward. But if things had gone differently and we'd completed a 20-yard pass or scored a touchdown or something like that, then obviously it would have been a huge punishment for us to get a 5-yard false start. I think you could definitely make a strong case that you should say something like, hey, in a situation like that in the future, the opposing team's coach should have some kind of option to decline the penalty or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But
That I think is the fix, and that's my only issue with it is that just with the way the UFL has innovated with so many different rules and things like that, for that situation to kind of be overlooked until we saw it unfold in the field is unfortunate because Arlington, for all intents and purposes, they should have won that game with that interception being able to decline the penalty. But, to each their own, and ultimately, Arlington, the loss is still in Arlington because they had plenty of opportunities to put the game away and they didn't. So, sometimes those things come back to bite you. But it's
yeah,
unfortunate for Stephen Jones because he dropped a pick a couple of weeks ago and now he just had one taken away. So,
yeah. I mean, my thing about that game is, I mean, the two things I would say is, like I said, number one, you don't have to like it, but I think it was the right call. I mean, Mike Pereira could have turned a blind eye, I guess, but it was a pretty blatant false start, which again, technically by the rule book means that the play is dead, and so it's like the interception never really happened. Now, again, the refs on the field should have blown the whistle and stopped it, and they didn't, and so that's on them. But that's the rule, and I think it was the right call. Now, again, it sort of worked out in the Stein's favor, just the way the things unfolded. But that's the rules, and the league will have to revisit it in the offseason and see if that's something they want to change. But it wasn't necessarily the wrong call. And the other thing I would say is, like you were just saying, I mean, Arlington had so many opportunities to put that game away. I mean, they had four, I think, red zone trips, never scored a touchdown. They after that interception, I mean, yes, that could have ended the game if that hadn't been the false start. But also, it's not like they gave the Stallions a 15-yard, penalty in their favor or something like that and gave them a new opportunity. I mean, it was a 5-yard false start that backed them up to a 4th and 11. All Arlington had to do was prevent them from getting a first down, and the game's over, and they couldn't do that. And so, I think it was sort of a cat has 9 lives kind of situation where the Stallions kind of got a ninth, maybe an extra 10th life. But that being said, at the end of the day, I mean, I think Arlington has no one to blame but themselves for that loss. I mean, because they couldn't capitalize offensively when they were given the opportunity. And ultimately, when push came to shove, as well as their defense played, or maybe better to say as poorly as the Stallions offense played for, 59 minutes, they couldn't get a stop when it mattered. And so, that's my thing. I mean, I understand the frustration. Obviously, if the tables were turned, I'd be frustrated as a Birmingham fan if we lost the game in that fashion. But I think at the end of the day, that Arlington has no one to blame but themselves. And again, I think the call was the right call. You don't necessarily have to like it, and you don't necessarily have to like the rule, but this is sort of like you said, when you innovate and come up with new ideas, a lot of times new strategies or new rules or new things like that are meant to solve old problems. But a lot of times when you create new things, you also end up with some new problems. And I think this is a potential new problem that the league has kind of uncovered in the way that this situation unfolded. And again, maybe it's something they want to change, maybe it's not. Um, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the Stallions won, and um, that's all that matters. The good guys win again. So on that note, maybe just for a few minutes here, let's talk a little bit about this upcoming game because obviously it's been a few days since the Renegades game that's in the past, and now we've got I think an important matchup between the Stallions and the Roughnecks coming up this weekend. I mean, if the Stallions win, they move to 3-1 and have a 2-0 record in conference, which would be significant for playoff implications almost halfway through the season. Whereas if the Roughnecks can pull off a win, then you're looking at the Roughnecks being, 2-0, or I think, right, in conference, and 2-2 overall, and the Stallions being 2-2 overall, but only 1-1 in the conference, and so the Roughnecks would actually even jump ahead of them in the USFL conference standings. So there's a lot at stake in this game. And the Roughnecks, look to be riding the ship a little bit last week, but still a team with a lot of issues and a lot of questions. What's your thoughts on kind of this Roughnecks team heading into this game off of a close win against Memphis, and how they match up against Birmingham, a struggling Birmingham, at least struggling offense, not a struggling defense, but at least a struggling offense.
Yeah, I think the main storyline is going to be Nolan Henderson and how can he play because a lot of Nolan's flight, especially down the stretch last season, it was that week 8 game where he kind of emerged against Birmingham where he got them back into that ball game. Mark Thompson also helped out as well on the ground, but it was Nolan Henderson who really, used his legs to extend plays, and Birmingham didn't have a ton of answers for him when it came to like what he could do mobility wise. So obviously, I think Birmingham's defense is better this year than they were a year ago, which is surprising because they had a good defense last year.
Hmm.
But that to me, what type of start is Nolan Henderson going to get off to? Because he came into the game in the second half against Memphis, and really, the Showboats had a hard time, containing him. Especially, like what I love about Nolan is when he plays confident football, like he makes really good decisions. Like he'll escape the pocket, he'll keep his eyes up. He's still trying to find guys downfield. We saw that pretty often, finding Kiki Chisholm on the sidelines a couple of times, Emmanuel Butler in the corner of the end zone. Birmingham's got to be ready for that. They got to be ready to have guys that are going to be stepping up, and I think what helps the Stallions' case here is that they have really good DBs.
Hmm.
So you can afford to play a little bit of man and, trust that your guys are going to win some of those one-on-one matchups. So that way you can bring some extra pressure on Nolan, maybe put a spy on him or something like that. That's what they're going to have to do to win this game because Henderson's dangerous. And I think where Henderson struggles is when he's under pressure. That's when he starts to make mistakes. We kind of saw that a couple of times last season, especially when he played Memphis in week 10. I thought, just some of his decision making kind of, it just wasn't as high of a level as we've seen it from him a couple of times. So we'll see how it goes. But no, to me, the biggest X factor in this game is how is Nolan going to play and how does Birmingham attack him to make sure that he's not comfortable in the first and second quarter.
Well, I think along those lines, I mean, my question is, do you think Houston's O line can hold up against the Stallions D line? And I ask that because the Stallions this year, probably the most mobile quarterback they faced was in week 2 against, when they faced Michigan and Bryce Perkins. And I felt like they, for the most part, limited what Perkins was able to do with his legs. But because it was they were getting so many pressures. I mean, I can't remember the exact number of pressures they had that game, but I think it was in like the 20s. I mean, it was like almost every time he dropped back, he was getting pressured. And I felt like that really disrupted him from getting into a rhythm and from being able to use his legs. And I think if the Stallions D line can do the same sort of thing against Henderson, like you were just kind of insinuating, I think he's going to have a hard time. So, I mean, do you think this Houston O line can hold up against what looks to be maybe one of, if not the best D lines in the UFL?
That is going to be something to watch, obviously, and I think for Houston, you at least have Zach Banner returning. He was a starting left tackle. He missed last week. I think he'll help, but to your point, Houston's O line, it's been kind of hit or miss really throughout its entire career, right? I mean, you look at last year, there were so many struggles there, and they've made some changes. I think Tom Cable being in the mix has helped out a lot, but at the same time, can you get consistent play? I thought last week they did impressively well because they lost during the game. They had one of their guys go down, and Avery Jones came in, and he actually played impressively well for the most part. So The problem is, look, Birmingham's defensive line's been playing better and better with each week. We're seeing Ronnie Perkins step up on the edge. We're seeing Perrion Winfrey just kind of be disruptive in the middle. And then you still have guys like Carlos Davis in action. Like, it's one of the top lines in the league. So that's going to be a huge, huge test for Houston this week. Can their O-line hold up? And I like Birmingham's odds in that matchup for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think Winfrey or excuse me, not Winfrey, Perkins and Anai off the edge the last couple of weeks have really kind of come to their own and have looked, pretty unstoppable. And I don't know that Houston's going to be able to be the ones that stop them. But again, if Henderson can kind of break, contain, extend plays and create, then it could be a problem for the Stallions. Do you think, James, that the Stallions offense is going to be able to sort of right the ship this week and kind of get back on track against a Houston defense that is not maybe not the strongest in the league, but still has some really solid players? I know you tweeted out this week about Leon O'Neal, who's looking like an early potential candidate for Defensive Player of the Year, had a pick six last week. Do you think that we kind of see you kind of mentioned it earlier that this week will be telling whether we kind of see the Stallions team that we're used to, or they come out and struggle more? I mean, what's your, I guess, maybe if you had to kind of give a prediction or look into the future, what do you think the Stallions, will be able to do against this Houston defense?
That'll be a test for them because Houston's defense has been getting better and better with each week. And another thing to watch is the Roughnecks pass rush has been pretty impressive as well. Like they picked up Deshaun Bauer, who's coming in, had a couple of sacks over the last 2 games. Jameer Jones has been playing good football. They will be missing TJ Franklin on the edge, which will be a tough loss because he's been putting up some decent numbers as well. I think, Ken Birmingham's offensive line now with all of their shifts, right? Keaton Sutherland's now starting at center because Cole Schneider's out this week. So how is that going to impact this team and affect them? You lost Jaron Jones to injury, so he won't be around as well. And yeah, it's like I, it's I feel like what I'm worried about is we could see in this game where both of these teams struggle so much on the offensive line that it ends up being a slugfest again, which is, it's football, we enjoy it, but there's been a lot of slugfest this year, and I think we'd like to see, Matt Corral kind of light it up and see Nolan Henderson and see what he can do. But if these offensive lines are getting dominated up front, there's going to be no ground game, and there's going to be eventually lead to very little passing because it's just, if you don't establish the run, it's hard to throw the ball.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I really thought after week two, the Stallions offense was kind of moving in the right direction. And then last week they had a pretty big regression. And it's hard to know how much of that is due to a really good Arlington defense, how much of that is due to the struggles of Matt Corral. I mean, it's just it's been kind of one step forward, two steps back for the Stallions offense this year. So hard to, I don't know, hard to know what's going to happen. But overall for the game, James, give us your prediction. What do you think happens? What do you think the score is on Saturday?
I think Birmingham comes away with a win. I think, they're kind of hungry to get after it after, just a lot of self-inflicted wounds last week. Jay Sternberger fumbling at the 1 yard line, and there's just a lot of missed opportunities. Matt Corral forcing throws when like they were in a rhythm and they didn't need to try to force the issue. I like Houston's momentum. I think they're moving in a decent direction as an organization as a whole, right? They're looking a little bit better than last year, but it's the Birmingham Stallions. We know Skip Holtz will get this team right, and I don't see Matt Corral having another poor performance quite like that. I think he bounces back this week, and I think Birmingham wins probably 23-12.
Well, I hope you're right, James. I think we pull it off too, but I've become I still won't bet against us, but I've become maybe a little less confident as this season has gone on. Again, just as we wait to see if they can figure out this offensive side of things. So um, well, I appreciate your time, James. Before I let you go, maybe one last question I thought it'd be worth kind of talking about. It's not as much Stallions related, but there's been a lot of coaching changes throughout the UFL this season, and you've been kind of on top of that and breaking a lot of news about that. We've already had 3 head coaches step away from their teams either just before the season started or after the season started. We've also had notable names like offensive coordinator AJ Smith, who you've mentioned, you think should get a potential head coaching opportunity down the road, him step away. You've had defensive coordinator Greg Williams, maybe the most well-known defensive coordinator in this league, if not just coordinator in general, step away. So just a I think people have been kind of saying online this sort of thing, like, oh, this happens once or twice, it's okay, it's unfortunate, but it happens. But it's kind of getting to the point where there's been so many changes and so much turnover at the highest level of these coaching staffs that people, I think, are starting to kind of question and wonder, like, is this more than just a coincidence that all of this is kind of happening this year? So I just wanted to kind of, get your read on what you think. Is there something kind of league wide going on that's helping to contribute to some of these changes? Is this kind of just a perfect storm of things hitting all at one time? Is each situation kind of its own and unique, but it's just it is a coincidence, it's just kind of transpired the way it did? I mean, what's kind of your read on all of this
So
staff change in the UFL?
So the bottom line, I think, is that it is definitely not because the coach was like, "Oh my gosh, the UFL is a sinking ship. We got to get out of here." It is really unfortunate for the UFL that all of this is transpiring when it is. Let's be real. The UFL, it's a phenomenal league and it gives these guys opportunities. But a lot of these guys, whether they're coaches or they're players or whatnot, they're trying to get to the next level. Whether that's, Reggie Barlow, who left for a really good NCAA job. Like, I mean, that's an opportunity for him to continue to grow his career, have a year-round job, and try to move up the college ranks, which kind of seems like what his goal is at the moment. Ken Whisenhunt, Wade Phillips, both health-related things. Like, Ken, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with him, but I really hope he's doing okay. I hope his family's all right. But for him, I think the problem with the Memphis situation is that they brought Ken back. I feel like what should have happened is that they should have just had him stay on his leave of absence and just not return at all, because that would have made this a whole lot smoother. Instead, you had him come back for 2 weeks. They lose both those games, and now he's gone again. I think what it came down to is that he's just dealing with some stuff on his end, and he realized that he just like he tried to come back, like he was trying to make it work. It just the league is like, look, you know what, just go off. Like, we'll figure it out. Wade Phillips, similar scenario, right? He's on a leave of absence right now. He's been sick. He's missed a lot of practices. He hasn't been on the sidelines for 2 games. And this past week in Michigan, week one, at least in Arlington, he was up in the booth. He wasn't. He was not in the booth. He was nowhere to be found. He was back in the locker room. I confirmed with sources throughout the game. He wasn't there. He is sick. So right now he's just taking some time away to try to get better. Greg Williams in DC, I mean, he's going with Reggie Barlow to what is it, Tennessee State is where they're at.
Mhm.
So for that situation, right now it's a really, really important time for recruitment and trying to get guys in. Not only do you have Reggie Barlow there, but now you're bringing Greg Williams, and hey, I mean that's a big names. It helps bring players in. And then AJ Smith in San Antonio, that was just more of like he just was kind of sick and tired of how things were going behind the scenes and decided that it's best to just part ways. So it's one of those situations where it looks really, really bad for the league on paper, but if you actually understand what's going on behind the scenes, it's not like it's necessarily the UFL's fault. It's just more unfortunate timing that all of this happened within these last few weeks. Like ideally, someone like Wade or Ken would have been aware of these things prior to the season, and this is a whole other conversation we can have. This is seeing this unfold the way it is why I've been like, guys, maybe you should have considered some of these younger coaches a little bit earlier, but to each their own.
Well, that's what I was actually just about to ask you. Is I wanted to get your thoughts on, because I've kind of been thinking about this myself. But some of these older coaches, I mean, obviously they're great football minds. They have an incredible amount of experience. They have a ton of connections. They bring a lot of legitimacy to the league. Like, there's obviously, like, when you have an opportunity to bring like a Wade Phillips or a Ken Wisenhunt into your league as a head coach, that's hard to say no to, right? Um, but now that we're seeing it unfold, some of these guys that are retired more or less from, the NFL or college, that are kind of getting later in life in sort of maybe health wise, age wise, just aren't really able to kind of keep up. I mean, do you think that the league should take this into consideration? I mean, the league could be hiring, somebody pointed this out the other day to me, the league could be hiring up to 5 head coaches this offseason if they expand and add 2 teams, and if they replace 3 current head coaching jobs. So you could have basically half of the head coaches in the UFL next year potentially be brand new coaches. Do you think the league should look less at maybe big name coaches who are retired or sort of in the twilight of their career, but potentially come with kind of these, health risks or other kind of things that might prevent them from staying in the game, and look at maybe some younger names that maybe are less well known, maybe have a little bit less quote unquote legitimacy or credibility to them, to your average viewer, but are maybe a little bit younger, hungrier, have a little bit more to give, maybe at least in terms of their energy and their kind of, again, how present they can be, as far as what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I am all on board with trying to get some younger guys in, and I think that it's not necessarily about less credibility, but look at a guy like AJ Smith, who's been doing it in the spring football scene for a long time. I know things went weird with him in San Antonio, but he's still someone that should be considered. He's had a ton of success running his system. Look at Colin Bauer in Michigan. He's been the defensive coordinator the last couple of years, has been in the system for a few years now. He's had a ton of success, and that Panthers defense is one of the best in the league. Jaron Horton's another guy that comes to mind, right? I mean, he's USFL Assistant Coach of the Year in 2023. His show bus defense is looking pretty solid again. You look at the NFL and the direction that they've gone in lately. Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, Mike McDaniels in Miami, Sean McVay, who's gone to 2 Super Bowls now as one of the youngest coaches in the league. And look, Peyton Pardee now in San Antonio, he's the interim head coach. He's only 28 years old. He did a pretty damn good job this past Sunday. Like all things considered, with everything that was thrown at him ahead of this game, he really handled things well. You could see the energy he had on the sidelines, the way he connects with the players, and I think if the UFL really wants to continue to grow the product, they're going to want to give some of these guys not just an opportunity, but it goes two ways. Where one, it's a way for the league to be like, look, we're providing not just players, but now we're providing coaches and these people with opportunities. Two, it gives a sense where like, these fans, like they love the younger coaches. They embrace them. Like Jaron Horton has a whole freaking fan club. AJ Smith has a whole fan club. Like these guys are like really well known in the scene, and I think having them in more prominent roles will just help the league continue to grow in its fandom across the board. So yeah, and not to mention, some of these guys, coming in like a guy like Ken Wisenhunt, I question like how well does he actually understand the spring football ecosystem? Like someone like Colin Bauer, AJ Smith, etc. These guys understand what it takes to win in spring football. Someone like Ken, who's only been used to the NFL or the college scene, it's completely different. Like spring football is its own niche, and that's why I think if you can kind of have some homegrown coaches that come up the ranks, I think that's what will help the league move forward.
Yeah, it's not that. I think it's not that unsimilar to players to some extent. I remember when the XFL 2020 kicked off, they brought in some quarterbacks and they brought in some maybe more well-known quarterbacks that were kind of in maybe the middle or later stages of their career, or maybe early stages of their career, but kind of didn't get off on a good foot in the NFL. Guys like Landry Jones, Cardell Jones. And, I think a lot of people anticipated, oh, these guys are going to be the face of the league. They're really going to kind of dominate. And for the most part, that wasn't really true. I mean, Cardell Jones did have some success, but Landry Jones was not impressive in his tenure with the Renegades. And the guys that really shined were guys like PJ Walker, who prior to that wasn't probably really like a household name. People didn't really know his story or follow him much. And he kind of emerged as a star. And I think that was a kind of an eye-opening thing for me on the player side of things that, hey, maybe instead of going after guys that had a name in college or somewhat of a name in the NFL, but are kind of maybe struggling or, kind of again on the tail end of their career or something like that. Maybe you should allow stars to emerge, younger guys to emerge in your own league and kind of become stars themselves. And we saw that with the USFL, like, 2023, they brought McLeod Bethel Thompson in, who was a big name, and that was like a significant signing, but it didn't really pan out. I mean, he had a good year. Don't get me wrong. They made the playoffs and stuff, but he wasn't the MVP of the league. He didn't dominate like maybe people thought he would. And it was really Alex Magoo that really shined and became a star. And like you said, kind of got like with Jaron Horton, kind of got his own fan club. And so, I kind of wonder if the same lesson is there to be learned about coaches that, yeah, there's sometimes maybe an opportunity to bring in somebody who has a big name that's well known and well respected across the country. But that might not be all it's cracked up to be, and it might actually there might be something to kind of letting these younger coaches or these coaches that are really, like you said, committed to spring football, kind of emerge as coaching stars of their own. And at this point, if a kind of a casual fan hasn't turned in yet, like I don't know what you know just because you hired Ken Wisenhunt, it's not like they're going to probably tune in now again. I mean, again, it helps lend some credibility to the league and stuff like that. But the league is Bob Stoops. It has Wade Phillips. Like it has big name coaches. It's not like that's a problem with the league. So I don't know. I think I'm becoming more and more convinced that the league should give an opportunity to some of these other guys.
And
Go
And
ahead.
a guy that might get a few people to tune in would be like an Anthony Becht, who's getting his first coaching experience
Sure.
because like the way he's so passionate, the way he fires the players up, like all the fun, like mic'd up bits that we get from Becht during the game, like that's really good. Like that's what the league needs to lean into. So I hope we see more of that moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, I tweeted about it. I thought Anthony Blevins is a guy that really should have got an opportunity. He's in his late 40s. He's still got a lot of life left in him. Not to be morbid about maybe some others out there, but he he's got a lot of NFL experience. He really helped the Stallions defense. I felt like when he came in at the end of last year, he was given an opportunity to be the head coach in Vegas, but that fell through. I mean, he's like a guy that, I think probably would have loved the opportunity to be a head coach after that got taken away from him. And I don't think he'd be dealing with some of these same issues that you are currently with some of these other guys. So there are names like that out there that, I think should be looked at maybe instead of some of these guys who are, well-known, well-respected NFL coaches, but are retired and, spend all their time golfing and like they thought of collecting a paycheck for a couple months in the spring or something like that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, James, but something to continue to monitor as we move forward. Appreciate you coming on here, taking the time to do this. Glad we could catch up a little bit, and we'll look forward to a full slate of action this weekend, and hopefully having you back on here soon to talk more about what we hope will be the Stallions train continuing to roll. So thanks again, James, and enjoy the UFL week action this weekend.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on, Luke, and we'll see if the Stallions get a win this week.
All right. Adios.